And welcome back, fourth and long fans. It's another episode of Donnie's Disposals. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going over the AFLW off season. And I have two amazing guests with me today. Let's introduce both of them first before we get into the center of our episode. We will start off with two familiar faces. We'll start off with our lady of the panel here, and that is Miss Drea Casillas, my one of my co-hosts in the AFL review period. Drea, how are you, young lady?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. And then, as you can see here, I have a very familiar face as well, my draft expert from Draft Central down in Melbourne. That is Mr. Peter Williams. Peter, how are you doing, sir? How is Melbourne?
Yeah, really good. Like feeling pretty good at the moment. We're still currently in a little bit of a lockdown, but the weather's nice, so it's a nice little time to be at least going out for a walk when you can and enjoying the sunshine. But plenty of footy to talk about, so looking forward to it.
All right. This has been an amazing week, but we will get to the breaking news, the latest news over the week a little bit later in the episode. We'll start off with it. We'll start off with the sign and trade period. It has come, it has gone. And man, did we see some big names move. So, really quickly to both of you, who are some of the names that moved? And do you think they're going to make a big impact? Drea, who are some of the moves that you think really will make an impact this season for their new clubs?
Oh man, so a lot of big names moved around, and there were actually a lot of surprises. But I was really impressed with GWS's pickup. I thought Jazz Frio, Katie Loynes, Chloe Dalton. GWS is just always on the brink of, just of taking the entire competition, and they just need something to put them over. And I think those pickups are going to be really helpful to them.
All right, Pete, what were some of your impact players that got moved from club to club?
Yeah, I thought the one who has the most potential, I feel, is Chloe Shear going from Adelaide to Geelong. She's sort of just scratched the surface. Obviously, did an ACL in the year she was meant to get drafted, and then's really come up and been pretty impressive as a young player. And I feel like she's going to add something to that Geelong forward line to try and get them up the ladder. And the other one was Liv Purcell going from Geelong to Melbourne. I think that she's going to have a real big impact again coming from injury. But I thought that, Melbourne did really, really well to get her in for a pretty good value, really. And I think Melbourne as a whole picking up the players over the offseason, including Taylor Harris, obviously, like you're going to have those players that can come in and have an immediate impact. And it's probably one of the fastest rebuilds we've seen in history. After 12 months ago, they got rid of all their players and suddenly they're ready to go again.
Yeah, and then for me, it's actually two teams that actually traded with each other. I have Collingwood. Sabrina Frederick, I think, is an amazing addition to a team that was already really, really good. And now you add a great power forward who can also hop in the ruck after they lose the ruck to retirement. I think this is a great addition for Collingwood. And then Richmond. I think Richmond picked up some more depth. They reunited the Hoskin twins, which I have to say I'm a little disappointed because their back and forth pranks before their game this season, thought it was absolutely hilarious, especially one of the Hoskin twins having purple hair during the game was classic. But seeing the Hoskin twins back together and getting Poppy Kelly and Maddie Shevlin, I think Richmond, they were one of my teams I really, really loved watching towards the end of the year. They were progressing really well with some of the new talent and some of the experience. We'll have to see how losing Sabrina Frederick will affect Brennan up front, and how the second Hoskin coming in, how she'll impact it. But I think both Richmond and Collingwood, I think both improved. I think the obvious one is Melbourne getting Taylor Harris and Liv Purcell. That it's so hard to argue that they are not the winners of this sign and trade period with their moves. They really have stapled themselves into that spot of being a flag contender going into this year. So we jump from that. Really, recently we had the AFLW draft. Peter, this is your expertise, sir. Just as a quick overall before we get into some more of the nitty gritty of it, what were your thoughts in the AFLW draft? Did it go as you expected? Were there some surprises?
Yeah, I definitely think there were surprises. There's surprises every year, but I think definitely this year there were quite a few because I feel like heading into the draft, there was a lot of conversation about most of the top 10 was going to be taken up by, midfielders, or particularly inside midfielders. And then straight off the bat, like after the first couple of picks, which we knew were going to go the way they did, there was already surprises coming out, and a few different players that, while we expected to be sort of around the top 10 and vice versa, or around that mark, actually went right up in, 3, 4 or 5, whatever, and kept going like that. So it was a little bit of a surprise, and there were quite a few sliders, which was really good. But I think it showed the depth and more so, I guess, the teams and how they rate different players, because there are a fair few players that I rated quite highly that slipped a little bit. And then there's other players that I thought might go a bit lower down because maybe they haven't had as much opportunity as others. And they popped right up and were really high. So that was great to see. But and of course there were mature ages as well that got popped up later in the draft. So that was really great for a few of them to get their chances.
I think Dre is up with the next question.
So I guess if we're looking at the team specifically, do you think, like, one of the teams like Brisbane, with all of that, well, not a core, but a good number just retiring this year, do you think the pickups that they made are going to allow that next generation of leaders to really rise up, or how do you feel about their pickups?
Yeah, so Brisbane are an interesting one, obviously, finally coming off that flag, and it was probably perfect time for their players to step down or step aside, particularly Emma Zilke, obviously. But in terms of Brisbane, they've picked up 3 of their academy girls in Maggie Harmer, Bella Smith, and Michaela Pauga, who are all 3 unbelievable talents. So lucky enough to speak to them all when we went up to Queensland. They're really well-spoken player, like really well-spoken young women, and they know what they are able to achieve, and they're all very different. Like Maggie Harmer is more of your defender midfielder, like sort of that outside run, great runner, very exciting, top-end talent. Bella Smith's more your inside midfielder. And then you've got Pauga, who is able to play forward, really exciting, so clean inside 50. And I feel like the mix that they got, those 3 talents, it was a really good year for their academy. And I feel like getting all 3 and very different players really helps just add that extra class around the ground, not just in one spot. And then obviously they got Luca Yoshida Martin and Lucinda Puller as well, who are sort of former soccer players that have been playing in the Quaffle, that have which is Queensland State League, that have really been impressing, and enough so that Craig Starcevich, decided to take a chance on them, because they have been able to transition really, really well into the code.
Alrighty,
yeah, I think that academy system, I'm sorry, just it's incredible, and the talent that they're developing. It surprises me every year that this entire league of girls and women are playing there with such just high class talent. It's impressive.
Yeah, I completely agree. And for my next question, for me, the first round was dominated by Geelong and Gold Coast, both getting several picks early, getting a ton of talent in. But I got to ask you, Pete, who do you think came out better when it comes to it, that'll improve their team quicker, Gold Coast or Geelong?
It's a good question, because they've both brought in talent that is ready-made to go. I feel like the team that'll improve quicker will probably be Gold Coast from just looking at the draft. I feel like Geelong, the moves they made in the offseason, Shear and whatnot, I feel like they will advance there. But purely looking at the ready-made talent here, I feel like at least 3 of those 4 for Gold Coast will play straight away. Rowbottom and Levy will come straight in. Midfielders can go forward. They're going to be straight into the midfield and automatically add something. Ashanti Bush is that forward. She might be more of a medium long-term prospect, but very dangerous and exciting. And Giselle Davis is one that is, able to play up either end, but probably that lockdown key defender. And she's ready-made, played senior league footy, so she can play up there. Where Geelong, they have Prasparkas and Friswell. They're ready-made to go, so they can step straight in. Annabelle Johnson's been playing with their VFLW all season, so they're all ready-made to go as well. So where Gabby Featherston is, she's probably capable of going. There's probably a few things they're just looking to iron out with her, but she's definitely got the capacity. So I feel like a lot of these picks are ready to go. I think that in the overall scheme of things, that Geelong are probably going to move up quicker because of their overall off season, but certainly like Gold Coast having that 1-2 punch with Rowbottom and Levy in there, It's going to be interesting because I feel like they were two of the sort of three best players, which really is a coup, if you like, for Gold Coast, because obviously they can only pick the players that are in their state because of the zone-based draft. So to get Rowbottom to come up is a really big bonus for them.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was gonna ask you that. I meant to do second parter with Charlie Rowbottom deciding to nominate Queensland as her state. I mean, was that a shock in Melbourne, or was that kind of something that some people expected?
It was a bit of a shock. I think a lot of people sort of refer to it as they just say maybe Geelong was caught sleeping. I don't know how true that is, but like the idea is that Geelong, obviously still get Pressparkis, who was equally up to the task, and some argue obviously better than Rowbottom, depending. They're both different players, but Gold Coast to be able to get Rowbottom means that they get a genuine top like couple of picks in there, because Rowbottom was going to be pick 1 or 2 anyway. So to get her up and get there was really, really impressive for them. But obviously, as you know, brother James plays at Sydney in the AFL men's, and Rowbottom loves the sort of Sanders surf, as she likes to say. And she had a house, sort of holiday house down in Torquay, which is near Geelong. So a lot of people were assuming Geelong were going to pick her. Like, she's ready to go. She's already had the sort of family there. So I think for anything, it's more of a shock for Geelong, because that sort of has shaped the draft. Because I do believe that Geelong would have picked Rowbottom, just purely because of that link as well. And then, of course, it changes the entire draft, because you look at it from there, and just St Kilda then pick up Pressparkis and vice versa. And it all, it's interesting, but it certainly did shape the draft. It's been the biggest sort of call, if you like, because we haven't had someone who's a top, say, 10 pick that's decided to really change it up and nominate a different state. So to be able to do that was definitely, threw a bit of a curveball, but it was really, really good.
I guess my question is going back to just the development of these teams and how they're developing their VFW VWS clubs. Is how are we seeing more of the draftees go to their lower, or to go up to the team? Are we seeing the lower teams kind of develop more into senior players, or like are they getting traded or going to different teams?
Well, it's quite interesting because for those who don't know, like the VFLW season was a bit interrupted because of various lockdowns, COVID, all that kind of thing. Right. So we're still waiting for a grand final, which makes it all the more interesting. But what we saw in the preliminary final a few weeks back was Georgie Pressparkis and Zali Friswell both played for Essendon VFLW, and they had to play against Geelong the week after they were drafted. So it was very, very interesting, and sort of made for an extra bit of a storyline. So obviously Essendon don't have their own, or didn't have their own club at that point. So they couldn't have drafted them. But we do see a lot of teams. It's probably a mix. There are teams like Collingwood drafted Eliza James coming out of the VFLW program, as we saw the mature ages, Annabelle Johnson, Geelong. But then a lot of the time it's just whoever is best on the different clubs board. Like Annie Lee played with Geelong, went to Carlton. You look up the order, and there's quite a few that have done it, that have come through and maybe gone to a different club. Tara Slender obviously played with Essendon, went to North. You look through it, and Stella Reid played with Collingwood, went to Richmond. Shear again was Essendon, went to Richmond. So there's a few that have come through that have done that, but then there's others that haven't. So even Ash Richards, for example, went to St Kilda, played at sort of Port Melbourne and whatnot. So even though St Kilda could have had her, like the Southern Saints, it went that way. And I think it's a bit of a mix overall, but certainly I think that the VFLW is a good, development for the players, because they get to, once they're finished their junior footy, to go up, have a few games against the senior players, and it gives the recruiters a bit of an idea of how they would go against some AFLW listed talents.
Yep, that's great to see.
Yeah. So, and I'm one of those, everybody talks the glitz and glam of the first and second round players because they're household names, even at 17 and 18 years old. But I'm one of those, I like the sleepers. I like the people that are later in the draft. Sometimes that you may not see the first year right coming out, but you may eventually see it later. So real quick, Pete, some of the players round 3 and on that maybe, just maybe a sleeper that we maybe need to keep our eyes on for the future at their club?
Yeah, like there's a couple of real steals thanks to the I guess state-based draft, if you like. Perry King at North is the first one. I had her in the top 10, 43 to North Melbourne through that Tasmanian connection. That's just, that's daylight robbery, really. Georgia Campbell, again, father-daughter to Melbourne, that she should be a first-round pick on value. So she's really athletic. She's going to be fantastic. They got a bit of height. They obviously brought in Talia Gillard as well. So they got a fair bit of height into that Melbourne team over the off-season. And then you look Jess Doyle as well for GWS, obviously a Sydney Academy girl, captained the Swans there. No doubt there's quite a few GWS fans that'll be nervous when Sydney do come in a year's time, because they'll be expecting her to go across, as you would too, no doubt, Donnie. But there's quite a few that have come through that list. As I said, Porger. And another one's Emily Bennett at West Coast. I really like the way she's gone about it. But ticks a lot of boxes. And for me, she's someone that I think has a lot of upside. And once she's able to build a bit more fitness, will have a real impact. And one that's probably worth mentioning is Jazz Ferguson, because you like promoting the pathways and the never give up atmosphere. And for those who've been following as long as I have, like, I watched Jazz back in the NAB League, or then it was the TAC Cup. I think it was 2017, 18, where she was playing for Gippsland Power, didn't get drafted, was still quite raw, kept developing, went to VFLW, again, didn't get drafted, went back a few years, still didn't get drafted. I think this was probably her third full season in the VFLW, and has really grown each year and had a fantastic season for Collingwood. And when we get the grand final, she'll get a chance to play off for a second sort of flag. And she's going to be off to North Melbourne. So it's a really exciting time. So a bit of a mix there between the steals and then the mature ages who probably can have an immediate impact.
You stole my question. I was going to say, with Jessica Doyle being a Swans Academy player, do you think there's any worry in GWS's camp that with the announcement that in 2022-23 the Swans will be playing, that she may shift camps after that? But I'm hoping so, but I'm not going to hold my breath too. I know just playing AFLW is something that's an honor. So we'll have to see. I'm hoping, but we'll have to see. So Drea?
Yeah, I mean, with this class of draftees, they just keep on improving. And even speaking to the current AFLW players, they're even impressed with them, just with the skills and development, knowledge, even just calm and coolness on the field. So I think I kind of saw that and really caught a glimpse just watching Nina Morrison, just her first year and first game even. She didn't seem like a rookie player. Are there others that you see that are going to kind of just bring that same kind of composure and almost grace right away?
Yeah, well, obviously the top two sort of row bottom for Sparkers, they'll be have an impact from early on, I'd say. You can count on them to really step up. And Tess Craven from North, she's one that's ready to go. You can imagine her really coming in and definitely having an influence. And Stella Reid as well at the top end for Richmond. She'll be a really, really strong one. And then Courtney Rowley over at West Coast, she's come out of the Waffle W. She actually won a best and fairest sort of in her first proper season as a 15-year-old at senior level. So really exciting. She's just so class. She's very much like Georgia Patrikios, so very slick, very skillful. Someone definitely to watch there. And then you've got Amanda Ling, who's had a fantastic season for the Oakley Chargers, won the best on ground in the grand final and has ended up at the Bulldogs. So there are a few sort of at that top end that can have an impact. And of course, all the mature ages that have been playing VFLW can come straight in and are able to have an immediate impact. Imogen Milford at Carlton came from Casey. Mentioned sort of Ferguson, and obviously Imogen Barnett won the goal kicking for Collingwood and they picked her up. So there's quite a few that have come through that are ready to go pretty much straight away. And I think that they'll probably be playing either from round one or close enough to round one.
Man, just some incredible stories. I know with this draft, especially considering unlike the men's draft where it is primarily 18 and 19-year-old players. So who's an overager that you think is going to make a big impact that was drafted in this draft?
Yeah, like the ones that are sort of at the top end, there are a couple that actually went to the Bulldogs in both Ling and Elizabeth Snell. Now, Snell's one that I've quite liked for a few years. She's got great athletic traits, able to move really, really well, bursts out of the stoppages. Back in 2019, I think it was, she kicked 6 goals in a game, so she can play as a forward. She's very exciting up there. She's another overager who's pretty much ready to go. Dana East is one who's come out of Swan Districts in WA. She's one that caught my eye early in the season, and that was before she was sort of really talked up. It was just her clean hands in the stoppage. She's able to get it out, got a nice burst, can hit the scoreboard as well. She's just a good decision maker. I feel like for Fremantle, it just adds that extra depth to the midfield in there, and I think she's going to be really exciting. And another one who was taken in that little, I guess, second round group as a overager is sort of Abby Ballard, who went to Adelaide, who missed out last year, had an injury, delayed her season, didn't come in until halfway through. She's a real tough nut, and someone who I think the Crows really wanted to get in, because as we know with the expansion, Porter coming in as well, so they're going to be able to pick the eyes out of the draft.
Do you find now, at least with the draftees, that coaches or clubs are looking for key players, or are they looking for more versatile players and leaving the key players to be more of the veterans?
I think it comes down. I definitely think that they want, if they're going to get a player in that perhaps will start straight away, they'll go for a more experienced one like Collingwood did with Imogen Barnett. But I feel like Collingwood, for example, we know weren't too far off, getting to the premiership. They only just lost to Brisbane, who won the eventual flag. So I feel like they brought in Barnett because not only did she play for the club, but she's ready-made to go. She's a forward option. She gives them that extra size. And I feel like that was one that they had to pick in, and they're, more immediate fix, if you like, where clubs that are, able to develop their tools, they've got some time to really work on them, build them up. Like you sort of look at, I think Fremantle picked up Amy Franklin, for example. She's been playing senior footy, and she certainly could have an impact from early on, but she's very similar to Roxy Rue. And I think you'll see over time that they're going to have the most exciting forward line in the competition with those two, because she's got the same athleticism. She's able to go up in the air, and she's just unbelievable when it hits the ground. So I feel like from a tall perspective, she's going to be someone that might develop, and she might start a little slow, but she'll really get around to it. And Tara Slender, who I sort of have as my sort of steal of the draft. She went to North with 19. I had her as sort of the top 3 overall kind of thing, or from Victorian pool anyway. She's someone who can play midfield, forward, and defence. And she's probably stakes the case for the other argument, because it'll be interesting to see where they play her, because she can play just about anywhere. We look at Zali Friswell, who went in the top 10. She can... she's been trialled everywhere. She's been really, really good as a midfielder, and she went forward and back in the champs and VFLW, which really taught me a lot about, I guess, not too much, I guess, pay attention to perhaps what others are thinking, because what happened there was I thought, she got dropped from Vic Metro and played in a back pocket. And I thought, maybe the clubs aren't thinking much of her, because originally I'd had her in the top 20 and thought, yeah, she's got great midfield skill, great run, great carry, all this kind of thing. And then she got dropped from there. I thought, maybe she's not rated as highly as others. So I sort of dropped her down the order. And then when she went in the top 10, I was kicking myself, because I was like, I really loved her as a midfielder. And obviously that's what the Cats have too. So they've definitely got someone who can come straight in, but she's got that versatility. Even if she's got to work on it, she's able to play all those 3 lines. And Courtney Rowley, again, for West Coast, she's someone who's played midfield, half forward, half back. When I chatted to the Peel Thunder coach, Steve Markham, at the start of the year, he said basically he'd love to have 3 or 4 of Courtney Rowley's, because she can play anywhere. And then that way, they just know they're going to do the job. But yeah, I think it just comes down to what the club needs. And versatility is great. I feel like it's probably really, really important, because you can play in different positions if something isn't going right. But if you're, say, an elite talent in one position, like we saw with, Imogen Barnett kicking so many goals, then you don't necessarily need the versatility if you're going to come in, do a specific role and do it so well.
Okay. For me, I've always wanted to ask this as a draft expert. I know you keep an eye on so many players during the year, but I want to know with so many of these girls now playing more and more footy, playing younger, playing earlier, are you seeing the skill development more and more each year? I mean, is this draft class would it be a stretch to say that this draft class is skill with the footy, off the footy, all around footy IQ better than previous drafts, or is this one of those where it's just a hardworking group?
Yeah, look, there's definitely skill in this group. I feel like last year I probably liked the draft from an underage perspective more, so from your 18s and down. But then obviously there was that whole missed year as well that these players didn't get, which would have been crucial for them in their development. So it's one less year we get to see of them. So I feel like maybe their first year or second year in the AFLW is where they'll start to really show where they're at. I definitely feel like the top end of this draft was a little deeper than last year's. But yeah, we saw a lot of the mature ages getting picked up in this draft because maybe it's the uncertainty a little bit with the lockdowns and less footy and knowing they've got more years under their belts. But I certainly want to answer that question in 12 months because next year's draft is an absolute bumper draft. Like just thinking about it, I remember at the end of this draft, I was like, oh, let me try and think up 20 names. And I remember seeing over 30 that I was like, how do I squeeze this into 20? Like it is a really, really good draft next year. And yeah, so many players are already stepping up at under 18s level that are still got another year to go. So it's just growing. And there's some, and this will make everyone feel old. There's some 2006s who have been playing, born in 2006, that have been running around for under 17 level. So 2 years under their level, not till 2024 draft, and they're already showing some great signs. So it's only going to get better, and definitely like with the expansion and everything, you're going to see these girls that just come through, and more will play because of the opportunity. So it's definitely a really, really exciting time.
I guess my question kind of goes to how you even try to guess where these like players are going to end up going. Is it easier or harder when a team has a lot of draft picks in the first round, like you saw Gold Coast or just Geelong with more than the other clubs? Is it obvious who they're going to pick? I imagine 1 and 2 is, but what about the rest, and how do they fill in, and how when you're guessing, are you very accurate or are you totally off?
Well, I mean, it's always very hard at the moment, like because you know roughly where the players are going to go. Like you can generally, pick, say, a top 30 and say 25 or more will sort of go. I know I did probably 40 and about 33, 34 of them got drafted, that kind of thing, out of the 50 odd. So they're going to actually get picked up somewhere. It's just a matter of where, and the state-based draft makes it easy because it kind of gives you a free hit. You know that some of the ones that are going to get selected there, you knew who Brisbane was going to pick. It was just a matter of what order and that kind of thing. And over in WA, you knew the players that were going to get selected. It was just a case of which order they went, the same thing. So it makes it easier in that regard. But certainly from Victorian standpoint, it's difficult because you kind of look at needs and then players and perhaps who might fit those needs. But then you've also got the clubs, maybe, if you played at maybe Dandenong or Sandringham, you go to St Kilda, or, if you played at Geelong Falcons, to Geelong Cats pick them up. Like it is quite difficult in that regard. But I definitely, that's more of the fun exercise to go afterwards. But definitely I myself prefer to sort of just look at it from a power rankings perspective of who are the better players and where I rank them, and then sort of compare, did they get picked up? If the players are in there that didn't, why not? What do I need to sort of tweak for next year and that kind of thing? So I definitely prefer the power rankings in terms of backing myself for that, where for the Phantom draft, everyone wants to know and everyone wants to go, who are we picking up? But realistically, no one can really know, like even, unless you talk to every single club. And even then the clubs aren't going to, show their hand too much. So it's always going to be difficult unless the other clubs basically dob on them and say this is who's going to go. But it's quite interesting because an example was leading up to the draft when we got word that Amanda Ling was going to go fourth to St Kilda. So we thought, oh, great, we've got that. That'll round it out. And then, of course, on the night, it didn't happen, and she slipped right down to the Bulldogs. So even though that was like from sort of that development level, because that's a lot where we have our contacts and who we deal with because we're seeing them all the time, even though there was a fair bit of talk that she was going to go that high, the fact that she slid right down there just shows that, well, one, that anything can happen on the night, and two, that it shows the difference in where clubs rate them and who they might take. Because if one club doesn't take them with this pick, then perhaps they slide all the way out to this pick to the club that next rates them, which is really, really an interesting facet with a draft that you see each year for both the boys and the girls. So definitely with the girls, it's getting trickier. Like in the early days, you'd see a few girls that would only play, like, you know, who was going, like you saw Chloe Malloy, you saw Monique Conti, Isabel Huntington, like you knew they were going at the top, and you could pretty much guess every player that got drafted. Now it's getting more tricky, which is really, really good because it means it's more challenging. There's more depth, and we're seeing that come through in the under 18s and at the state leagues.
And that's absolutely great, because that transitions right into my question is with depth, more depth of these players that could be draft eligible. I know not everyone that was 18 that was in that prime draft age got drafted. So could you give me like 3 or 4 names that, I know you said next year's draft is a bumper draft, but they're going to sneak in next year and potentially be drafted, especially now that we have expansion?
Yeah, for sure. So my highest ranked player that didn't get drafted was Jade Anthony, who I actually am still a bit gobsmacked didn't get drafted, because I thought she was inside the top 10 players going around. She won Vic Country's MVP. She's, best and fairest winner, or, chugging along at the Stingray. She could not have done much wrong. She was an academy member in her bottom age year. Unfortunately, didn't make it in her top age year. But she was one that I just thought, she'll get drafted somewhere, surely. And when she didn't, I think it was a little bit of a shock, because she's got the ability. She's a kick. Her kicking, her decision making, everything's perfect. I feel like it's more fitness for her. She had a couple of concussion issues as well throughout the year, got knocked out a couple of times. So maybe that puts a bit of an erring caution in the clubs. But certainly, I think fitness is the big thing that they've told her to go away and improve on. And for me, that's probably the easiest thing when you're already, fit compared to the average person. It's not too hard to keep building it. But she's definitely one. Another one's Gypsy Sherma, who an AFLW Academy member who felt a bit stiff afterwards because she was the front cover of our draft guide, and she didn't get drafted. But we thought we were going pretty safe with an AFLW Academy member, but she was only one of 2 that didn't get drafted. But she's a Monty to go to Port Adelaide. Like, she's a Port Adelaide Academy member. So again, you sort of mentioned it with Doyle. Do the Crows think that maybe she wasn't a ready-made one as much as some others? So if she's going to go in a year, do we potentially pick up Abby Ballard or something like that we can really, bring in immediately, and we know that's going to be there, where Sherma could be the face of Port Adelaide in 12 months. So do we let her go for a year like that? That's all things that I wonder now that potentially could go through their mind, especially when they've only got 3 picks. But she's definitely one. And Nyakoi Dojok was the other one, who's the other AFLW Academy member who missed out. Still quite raw. Her really good runner. She's able to, burst away, good overhead, reads the positioning, stands really well in the defense and is able to keep running. And it's just working on her kicking from this point, which has always been that sort of improvement. But she's one that I think will always sort of catch the eye with the way she plays. So more development. I think she'll be pretty good in the future.
Awesome. Trey, do you have any others?
Yeah, I guess we kind of got into some of the players that had really good stories of, not making it and then later making it. Do you have any others? I just love to hear them.
Yeah. If you look sort of through the list, obviously we generally mentioned Ferguson earlier. So she was one that really stood out for me. Megan Keeley is one who went to Richmond, had an absolute outstanding season for North Melbourne. She came from Tasmania, and basically they gave her the captaincy. They didn't get to play last year. It's always hard when you're playing in different state leagues to know how you match up, because the TSL, it's got some good quality, like the top players, But then obviously a lot of them, like if you're 15, you're probably playing senior footy. It's that sort of, I guess, better for juniors to come through rather than it's not as strong as some of the other state leagues. So she decided to come to Vic. And her season was absolutely outstanding. Like, I think it got to the point where she was leading disposals, marks, possibly clearances, and she was right up there with inside 50s and rebound 50s too. So she was one that just you almost couldn't ignore anymore. She just was playing too well. That was fantastic. Michaela Tuakarena is one who came out of nowhere. She came from rugby sevens and played tennis. So over in WA, her pace and her burst is probably the quickest of anyone I've ever seen. So she does get herself into trouble sometimes because she tries to go for a bit too much, but she's still got the rugby sevens sort of tuck the ball under the arms and run. So it is quite funny to sort of see someone do that. So she's one that's definitely worth sort of keeping an eye on as one for the future. And then I sort of mentioned briefly with Dana East. She's one who was playing local footy 12 months ago. She was moving to Perth, decided, look, I'll take a step up in the Waffle W, went to the State Academy. And apparently I talked to the talent manager there, and he said that we kept telling her to just slow down because she was just doing too much. Like, she'd be running after training and all that. Like, they're like, you need to like slow down. You're going to burn yourself out. But she just works so hard. And she literally just forced her way into draft contention. And I think the same could be said for Brooke Tonin too, over from Glenelg going to Adelaide. She was one who was vice captain at under 16s level for South Australia. And I saw her for a couple of years. She played as like a forward pocket, back pocket. She showed some nice signs, nothing too much. And then this year she's just played off half back and a wing and has just dominated. And by the end of the year, you're like, yeah, she's just really improved rapidly. And it's players like that you see that you can kind of see signs, and then you're like, I hope they're able to put it together, and then they do. So it's that sort of twofold of the experienced players who maybe miss out on their chances and then finally get it eventually. And then there's the players that sort of come out of nowhere that you sort of see signs and they build up and then they really have a great season at the right time. And I know I love watching right back at the V-Line Cup, which is under 15s level. So a lot of these girls I've actually seen since they were sort of under 15s. And it's always great to sort of go back and read what you wrote about some of them saying, they did this really well. They did really well. And then they got drafted and you're like, yeah, I remember when they did this and all that. So you've seen them say 3-4 years and you're able to add stuff on top of them and sort of say, look, this is how they progress. So that's sort of what I like doing, watching them and then going, okay, so these are the ones to watch for next year. And then it builds up like that. So just sort of see these girls that you've seen since they were basically 14, 15, to see them get drafted is definitely really exciting.
Wow.
That's amazing. Great. I love the great stories, but I want to go to one, but before we move on to expansion, I've got several questions when it comes to expansion that I think you could be really, really helpful with. I have two sisters were drafted. One is going to be joining her sister with Tegan Levi joining Gold Coast with her older sister there. And then Georgie Prasparkas going to Geelong with Maddie Prasparkas being at Carleton. So two questions here. When it comes to Maddie and Georgie, when they were drafted, you as a draft pro, who had the better CV going into the draft? Was it Maddie or was it Georgie? And then with Tegan, her announcement that she still wants to play rugby sevens, a lot like her sister who went to the Olympics. Is that really going to affect her game of footy, or do you think it'll only enhance her and actually make her that much more of an important part of Gold Coast?
Well, in terms of Tegan first, like Tegan is someone who I think we've shown through Monique Conti and players like that, they can juggle different sports. And we've seen like Maddie going to the Olympics, she's more than capable of being able to juggle that. And she's got that role model in the family, which helps. So it's not even like she has to sort of reach out to people outside her immediate family for that kind of advice. And I think there's a lot of other players in that same boat that maybe juggle a couple of sports, decide what they want to do. Like the Karras sisters, they both played elite level netball at junior level. So they've sort of got that. The one girl who got drafted, the mature age of Jess Good, who got drafted later on to Carlton, she actually played basketball this season as well as football. So there's a few that are coming through, but certainly from Tegan's perspective, I don't think it'll impact her footy. I think she'll be able to juggle it really, really well. She's been able to do it to the point of where she's made the AFLW Academy, got drafted in the top 10. And I guess Charlie Robot hadn't nominated for Gold Coast, and she would have been pick 1. So we would have been talking about her as the first pick in the draft, which would have been really exciting. But definitely I think she'll be able to juggle it. In terms of the Prasparkas sisters, in terms of what they've been able to achieve, Maddie probably had the higher CV, if you like, because she dominated since she was under 16s and won awards. But the real issue is that Georgie didn't really get a chance last year to play. She actually won the best and fairest as a bottom ager, so an under 16s player at NAB League level. So I feel like if they'd played a proper season last year, then the answer would probably be Georgie, because Georgie is better developed than Maddie at the same age. So as under 16s, she was slightly taller, had a few more weapons, which is very scary for anyone who's seen how good Maddie is. But Georgie, I think generally is considered a better player at the same age. Like if you compare weight for weight kind of thing, she's a better player than what Maddie was. And we're going to see that develop. I remember watching her at under 16s level, and she kicked 7 goals and a half basically on a player. And I went, this is just ridiculous. Like she's still got 2 years to go. How does she improve from here? Won the best and fairest, like league best and fairest and everything. And, this year she had a sensational year. And I feel like sometimes we often overlook the better players because we kind of expect so much of them. It's kind of like now you look at her and go, oh, she only had 20 touches or 25 touches. And I know as someone who gets a lot of feedback from people, or from, other families or clubs or things like that, there's often people that'll be like, oh, we managed to keep her to 20 touches. Like she didn't do that much. And it's like, yeah, but it's still like, more touches or more influence than anyone else on the field, even if you restricted her. Like there's a lot of people that want to sort of, I guess, beat the best. And they're always like, oh, we were able to stop her or we were able to do this, but she's still clearly amongst the best going around. And I think she's going to be a better player long-term than Maddie, because she's also got the slightly better athleticism, taller, as I said, a little bit taller. And she's had that extra year of development, or extra couple of years of development that she's been able to play through Auskick and everything, and really come straight through. So she's been able to focus on that. And while she did miss the year, so she hasn't been able to, I guess, win as many awards as Maddie, like the fact what she did in her under 16s year and her consistency this year, she's going to step straight into that Geelong midfield. And yeah, she's going to have an immediate impact. And like, she probably deserves to be favourite for the Rising Star. Like, I think that's what most people would say if it was going to be that first year player, that she's probably the one to look to.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And I kind of preceded it. We've talked about it several times on this. Is earlier this week, we have expansion. All 4 of the teams that were not in, have gotten their license. They will all be here in 2022. And as the draft expert, I got to ask this question. I've heard this concern, shall we say, expressed by several people. Are there enough talent in Australia currently that we're going to be able to support 4 new clubs next season?
Yeah, so I knew this was going to be coming, and I think I break it up into the different teams, which will be good news for some and maybe a bit challenging for others, which may not be as good. Port Adelaide, absolutely yes. Adelaide have had a state-based draft that is far too strong for far too long. The fact that they only picked 3 players, or like 3 to 4, depending on the year, is remarkable. Like they could easily have had 8 to 10 players drafted out of that state. And those that, if they don't choose to go into state, then they're sort of just stuck there for another year. The fact that they have AFLW Academy members and players like Zoe Venning, for example, won West Adelaide's best and fairest over Lauren Young, who's the greatest player I've ever seen at junior level, won the MVP. Zoe Venning won that West Adelaide best and fairest. She made All Australian. Like she couldn't have done any more than she did. She didn't get drafted. So for me, I think Port Adelaide coming in will more equalize the competition, because Adelaide have just been so strong, even though they haven't won the flag every year and they did have that down year. The only reason they had that down year is because all their players got injured. Like that's what people forget. Like you look at that and go, oh yeah, they had that one down year. Yeah, that's because, Aaron Phillips got injured. Chelsea Randall got injured. All their top players got injured. And the fact they didn't finish dead bottom shows how much depth they had. But the fact that they keep making grand finals, they've won a couple of flags, I think that'll be really great for Port. In terms of the Melbourne teams, I think, yes, there's enough depth. I feel like it'll be like when Geelong and Richmond and all them came in. I know it was a bit of a mix. North topped up, so they're a different story. But Geelong and Richmond, I feel like, that they probably won't win a lot of games, Essendon and Hawthorn. But I feel like they'll be competitive enough, and it'll be more competitive than what potentially Geelong and Richmond were, because there is more depth at junior level at the moment. So for me, I feel like there's more players that are deserving of getting drafted, because if we go back a few years to when it started, there were players getting drafted that there's no way they get drafted now. Like, they may or may not still be in the system. There's some that have retired, and that they wouldn't even be looked at now, where now you're just looking and there's players that you go, wow, they didn't get drafted. They didn't get drafted, where it's changed that whole narrative of, oh, wow, they got drafted. Like, they didn't really get much to do, or they didn't do much in the first years because they're just basically developing. Where now it's like, oh yeah, they're pretty good. They've won all Australians, best and fairest, but they're not getting drafted. And I mean, it's bad for them, but this is what will help them. They'll be able to go through and they'll get drafted, which is what they deserve. So for Essendon and Hawthorn, I definitely think that there'll be enough talent. It might be a bit tough in the first year or two, because obviously it's adjusting to that extra 40 players or 60 players, I should say, in the Vic pool, that's going to get an influx. But there's still a lot of talent that didn't get drafted this year, as well as mature age, like previous AFLW talent floating around, which will be hard. But I think that they'll get through it. Obviously now onto your Swans. That'll be the team that I'm most worried about, I must admit, only because New South Wales ACT is the weakest pool. It's just a fact. It's the weakest state pool. So I think they've got to get creative with and this isn't just for them, it's for the Giants as well, because we mentioned how they've done well over the off season, but it's just a case of finding a way to get people to the state, because it's they haven't had the development in there. It's traditionally been a rugby state for a long time. Even though Queensland was, their development pathways, Craig Starcevich is probably the best developed talent in the whole country. So he's done wonders with Queensland, which is why that was able to flourish. New South Wales ACT are growing, developing. They've got some good, solid talent. Like, it's no longer just one or two players that are really, really good. They've got a few that are blossoming through there, but obviously it's still the weakest pathway that has a team at the moment, like in terms of the talent pool, which is why obviously we're still sort of waiting for the Giants to really take off and go all the way, as we've seen with some of the other states have. We've seen Fremantle step up. We've seen the Queensland teams, Adelaide, obviously, they've all been able to take full advantage of their states. So for me, I think Sydney almost have to take a different approach and try and get some mature ages in there. They've got to try and almost do the North Melbourne approach and be like, get those ready-made talents to come in, and then you can pluck the eyes out of some of the young talents that are coming through, because the depth isn't there yet for the junior level. So you've almost got to look for that mature age and bring them in. And if they do that, I think they'll be all right. But I think right now, the teams all get sort of a pass, if you like, for the first year or two to just feel the atmosphere of coming in. We know it's going to be tough. And obviously the existing AFLW clubs won't want to lose anyone. So it's going to be interesting to see how they structure it. But I almost feel like what they did with the men's, almost like Sydney and Giants almost need that sort of cola, if you like, the sort of extra money to try and maybe attract people to go there, especially after this year. I feel like anyone would need to go there would want to get paid more. But the cost of living's higher there. That's why it happened. And I feel like they need to go down almost a different route to the others, but they're all going to get mature ages in and bring in players with AFLW experience from other clubs. But I definitely think for Sydney, it's more a case of bringing in mature ages than relying on the youth pathway per se. But you can still get, say, 4 or 5 really good youngsters that can come in and perform.
Yeah, it's interesting that you think about Sydney's pathway, because you see the Hawks and Essendon really just develop even that culture already, and have even if they're not playing senior levels, you still want to be a part of it, and you still have the fan base, you still have all this going on for you. So I am interested to see how they do that, because I always forget how much of a rugby focus Sydney is, and it is a challenge. And I don't really have a question to that. I just I think it's crazy to see, just for me, how the retiring players have gone, they've gone back to the AFLW clubs and developed and kind of felt that need to continue making their team stronger or their club stronger, and that's a huge disadvantage to others that don't have that.
And one thing I was going to say on the Sydney Academy, I actually watched them play their first game down in Geelong, and they were playing against the Falcons. The Falcons were one of the best teams. They rested some of their players. I don't think anyone at that ground gave Sydney a hope of winning that game in a million years, to the point where I asked someone from Sydney, oh, can I have a chat? Because I was doing commentary on the game, and I sort of said, oh, can we have a chat at halftime or at some point during the game? And they go to me, sure, just come get me when we're, 10 goals down at halftime and I'll come have a chat. Like, that is how much they thought they were going to get smacked. And they ended up rolling them. And I think everyone at that ground was just like, wow, what's just happened? Like, it was just a shock. So I think people sort of then perhaps went, maybe we were underestimating them or things like that. But it showed that it was such a well-coached team and a really well-coached unit. And I feel like if they use that to go into the AFLW program as well, and that goes for all these sort of teams, but particularly the academies, Port's the same, but Sydney is one that can travel around and have played them like they did in the Adelaide girls. If they use that as almost like their breeding ground, if you like, for their club, then they can get their structures already right to bring straight into the AFLW system. And I know, chatting to like Nick Davis and obviously Jared Crouch, who are coaching them, that they're, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to bring players that can have that impact. And it was just a great result that day. And it just sort of shows that good coaching and good teams can kind of overcome a team of stars. So it's definitely going to be an exciting time for all the teams and see how they go about it.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's more of an opportunity, kind of how GWS approached Alicia Eva, just saying, hey, we're wanting to develop you into this coach, and we're willing to do this, willing to invest in your post player career. It might be just a great way to attract players, especially the mature players that are looking for opportunities. We've seen the amount of opportunities for women coaching in the league.
Yeah, for sure. No, I definitely think it's a case of all the clubs, I think, have to go out and sort of say that, would you like to do this? Come play for our team. We'll give you this. We'll give you the captaincy. And again, to sort of go back on how long, I remember when Alicia Eva, before they drafted the first lot and she came in as, went to the Pies, she was coaching Calder Cannons. So down here in Vic, and she was basically coaching them. So she was coaching Chloe Molloy, Monique Conti and all that. So I feel like also as coaching, you're also learning things when you're also playing. So they're learning things from this new group that's coming through, going, wow, that's a nice trick to have, or that's something I can add to my resume. And I think at the moment it's a bit of both. So the fact that some of the coaches can still be playing, because a lot of the coaches at like either NAB League level or perhaps like the different academies are still either playing or having a match day role with AFLW clubs. So that's really exciting because they can also see who's coming through, and they're already getting to interact with some of the players that will probably be teammates in a few years.
That's fantastic. And this isn't a completely a draft question, but I've heard this rumor coming out there, and I really want to hear both of your responses. Is that I've heard in Erin Phillips's contract that if Port gets a team, she will be allowed to join Port Adelaide since her father played for Port. Am I not right? Am I correct on that?
Yeah, that was apparently the rumor. Obviously, I can't say that anyone's really seen the contract, but there was something that came out back in 2015 saying that Erin Phillips will be the first Port Adelaide footballer. Because that's what they said. If Port ever gets a team, Erin Phillips is going to be the first player signed. And to me, maybe that's the reason she's still going. And I couldn't think of anything better than her being that sort of marquee player to come in year one. She'll probably only play for a year because probably by then she's into her late 30s. And she's going to obviously only have a year or so left. So I think she'd probably be someone who would come in for a year, add that extra class, and then potentially, set Port Adelaide up for the future. But I definitely think there's a huge chance she goes to Port.
I mean, Drea, what do you think on that?
That would be an exciting prospect. I just kind of think that Erin Phillips is going to end her career exactly how she wants to end it. So I don't know what that means as far as whether she stays or goes, but it'll be as she wishes it, classy as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And my thing, and I'm hoping this would happen, and I've heard this because she has done some coaching things, but I think it'd be awesome for the league is she plays 1 year for Port, and then she assumes the head coaching role of Port Adelaide. That would be a nice little story. I don't know how much she would want to do that. I mean, I know she's got a growing family and everything like that, but what a great story it would be for Port Adelaide for her to play the inaugural season with the club and then eventually assume the head coaching role. I mean, it's almost a storybook ending. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they could go that way, and it's also worth mentioning. I know we mentioned Beck Goddard earlier as the first sort of female coach to come in. Now that obviously we lost Peter Searle, the Port Adelaide actually have Naomi Maidment, who's in there, that is the coach of the academy, and that is probably likely to be Port Adelaide's first coach. And they're certainly a team that's been pushing to have female coaches leading the way. And there's another one, Narelle Smith, who's been absolutely brilliant, an assistant coach at Adelaide, and has done a lot of the commentary for Sample Women's, and she just knows the games in and out. So I think she's another great choice that's going there. But I definitely think that Naomi Maidment and Narelle Smith will probably team up potentially to lead Port. And I think we're going to see a few more females coming into that coaching after everything that's happened. So it'd be great to sort of see that. But definitely I think Erin Phillips has probably got coaching in her blood for the future. So I reckon she'll probably end up going in and at least learning the ropes from someone and then taking over somewhere at least.
That'd be amazing story. And I don't know about you two, but I think that is a great spot to end this podcast. I want to thank you both for coming on. Drea, again, such a love for women's footy, being a great person out there in the New York Magpies. Continue your awesome work out there. I keep an eye on you guys over here in the Midwest. Pete, again, an amazing guide. I had so much fun going through the statistics and reading some of the stories. It was absolutely awesome. You're such a wealth of knowledge. You were so much fun to chat with. I'm so glad we were able to get both of you on at the same time. This has been an absolute blast.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you. Great to meet you too, Pete.
Yeah, you too. It's been a really fun time. I always love chatting footy, so always a good time to be chatting about it.
All right. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to end our episode again. Drea, Peter, thank you so much for that. Fourth and Long fans, this is the end of the Donnie's Disposals episode about AFLW. Very soon, ladies and gentlemen, AFLW round 1 will come. Keep an eye out for it when it comes out. We will be reviewing it again this year. Thank you so much, you two, again, and have a wonderful evening, and we will see you again soon.